Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Future Leader Sessions. We're super excited. This is number 10 in the series. Can you believe we've come this far? We're just going to wait a couple of seconds as we allow you to settle in, get your cup of coffee, get your glass of water, get your notepad, because we're going to be talking through loads and loads of stuff today, all on mastering communication. And we're going to admit the people in the Zoom room. We've got people joining us from Zoom, and we've also got people joining us live on LinkedIn. So we are connecting with you live right now on two different platforms, and we are super excited to be talking about the really important topic of mastering communication. So before we get into it, I'm going to start with a couple of minutes just to remind you all, if this is the first time that you're joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're really excited to be talking more about communication, but the way that this session runs is a little bit different to some of the webinars you may have seen in the past. So I'm going to just explain a little bit how this is going to run. The first thing is that we are going to be doing this on Zoom and LinkedIn Live. This is a 90-minute event. If you are watching us on Zoom, we are going to be in listen-only mode, and I've actually got a few notes that I'm going to bring up on my screen just to show you. So if you're in Zoom, you're in listen-only mode. That means you can't turn on your camera or raise your hand. If you're on LinkedIn, you're going to be watching us live through the Zoom plugin. That means that if you have tech issues on Zoom, you can message us. Sonia's on hand to help. But if you're on LinkedIn, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help you. Look where LinkedIn is, there should be a URL directly into the Zoom chat. So if you have issues watching us on LinkedIn, you can get into this Zoom chat if you look out for the URL that's posted below the event page. We are recording this and it will be available on the Elemed's website, but the value of this session is in having your questions answered. So make sure you stay here for the full 90 minutes to take the opportunity to ask your questions to our amazing panel who have brought with them many years of experience across a variety of different verticals, talking about mastering communication. We will not overrun. I am looking for your feedback as always. And the most important thing I want to talk about is Slido. So Slido is going to be the central point where we are going to be sharing communication. It's where you're going to be interacting with us and where we are going to be looking at the questions that you're going to be asking. So if you scan this QR code right now, get your phone out, scan the QR code. If you prefer to do it on desktop, in the Zoom chat, you're going to see a link to Slido. You're going to have the opportunity to open up Slido, and you are going to see in there some pre-registered questions that some people have already put in. So you can browse those. The ones you like the look of, give a thumbs up. Let us know that these are the ones that we need to be answering in the second part of the session. If you have your own questions as we're going through the session, log them on Slido. And we're going to be looking through what question is the most popular question. And that's how we're going to be answering them in the second part of the session. And we're also going to run some polls. So let's just give it a go and see if Slido is actually up and running. If you're looking into your Slido, you should see a question popping up any moment on your screen that is asking, where are you joining from? So let's just make sure that Slido is working and that there are some people out there watching us. Take an opportunity, take a moment to fill it out, and let's see. So we've got people here from Germany. We've got people from the UK. A lot of Germany and a lot of UK at the moment. Wow, we've got somebody all the way from San Diego, California. So I guess that's super early in the morning that they're joining us. So welcome and thank you. And I hope you're enjoying your breakfast alongside this really exciting session. We've got Paris, we've got London, we've got Singapore. Oh my goodness. So we've really got a truly global audience here, guys. I'm really excited and privileged to have such a wide-ranging audience joining us from all over the world to talk specifically about the topic of mastering communication. So without further ado, I'm going to take an opportunity to bring up our esteemed panel onto the screen. I'm going to stop sharing right now. And I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, but not only to introduce themselves. The question that I have is, please introduce yourself and give us one word to describe your communication style. I'm going to start with Amra.
Oh, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Elena. And thank you for your team for organizing this. It really is great. And I'm really excited to have such a broad audience here as well. I'm sure while we all learn in different ways, communication remains kind of a same way of mastering it. Doesn't matter where you're located. So I've been with the healthcare industry for a little bit over actually 25 years now. So a long standing in this community. I've spent many years working on regulatory, specifically regulatory advocacy, regulatory policy, regulatory intelligence in companies such as Medtronic, Abbott, and Bayer. In addition to my current role, which is with Viva Systems. And for those of you who don't know, Viva is a software manufacturer that really helps companies in their entire product lifecycle, from regulatory, quality, clinical, so solutions to really enable manufacturers to be more productive in those areas. But in addition to Viva, I also am an adjunct professor at a local university in Minnesota here in the United States. And the course that I teach actually really relates to this adventure that we're on right now here. It's international regulatory, but within that, we talk a lot about communication, and we talk a lot about the need to be culturally sensitive and really how to express ourselves depending on who we are interacting with. So I'm excited to share some of those learnings that I've gathered from my students as well with this audience. So really pleased to be here. Thank you so much, and I look forward to many questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. And what was the word to describe your communication style?
I would say transparent.
Nice. Thank you for that, Amber. Let's go over to I feel like I'm in the Eurovision. Let's go over to Morwan.
Hi, thank you so much, Elena. Thank you for the invite, and I'm also very excited to be being here. It's my first podcast, and I'm a bit nervous, so I'm looking forward to this and forward to the discussions we have. Yeah, I'm working as a regulatory affairs and quality manager as a VP at Occlutech, the German company. We have 3 different sites. I'm also the managing director of the German site. I started my leadership career 10 years ago with different notified bodies. I also worked as a consultant, and I was also in Japan, so maybe that's also helpful for mastering communication. And since 2023, I'm working for Occlutech. I'm very happy here, and thanks for inviting me as well again. And my word would be understand.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Morwan. Let's go over now to Jens.
Sure. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to contribute to this very nice event, and of course, very, very critical and important topic. My name is Jens Bruckmann. For my background, I'm an engineer as well as an MD with a business degree. I spent around about 2 decades in primarily medical devices. And here in the areas of medical, clinical, but also associated areas such as regulatory affairs, quality, also had a couple of roles where I very much supported commercial activities. I had the opportunity to live and work actually in a couple of European countries as well in the US. I've also worked for a couple of companies, including J&J and Zimmer Biomet. Currently, I'm serving as Chief Medical Officer for Karl Storz, located in Switzerland. For those of you who do not know Karl Storz, around about 10,000 employees. Karl Storz is in the minimally invasive surgery business. Core products include endoscopes, camera systems, and headquarters are located in the south of Germany. In my role, I'm responsible for medical and clinical affairs, as well as medical safety and risk management. Team size around about 30 individuals, primarily located in Europe, but we also have a medical affairs team in the US. To your initial question, one word, I'm trying to be authentic.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you so much, Jens. Lovely to have you on. And finally, let's go over to Jeroen.
Elena, thank you for having me. I guess good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are sitting, right? And I purposely start with that. I'm sitting in the Netherlands, guys. My name is Jeroen Bors. I work for Zimmer Biomet. That's an orthopedics company. So the short version of that is hips and knees, but of course we do a lot more. I'm in a global HR role. So the way I like to describe that is I typically start my morning with the APAC population, then I move on to EMEA and then on to the US in the afternoon. Happy to share my findings with all of you, my own personal learnings. I've been doing this for also 25 years. The way to describe it, unfortunately, Amra, you stole my thunder because I had in big bold letters, I had transparent written down. I'm going to use a bit of a Dutch phrase. So I guess the second one is probably direct. You know, I do like direct communication, but transparent would be my number one. And it was taken by Amra, but here we are, right? Happy to be part of this.
Thank you so much, Jeroen. So what you can all see is that communication is really personal, and it's different depending on, you know, who you're interacting with. Everybody has their own style. There's no one way fits all. And what we're here to talk about today is how to master communication. A lot of our people listening are in their first leadership, second leadership role, and communication is something that comes up over and over again. It's something that is super, super important, because if you can't get your point across, you can't move anything forwards in business. So what we're going to be doing today is really talking about your learnings, your findings, hopefully some examples as well that our audience can take away and learn from. So to those of you that are watching and maybe have just joined a little bit late, I just want to remind you that this session is going to be split into two halves. The first half of the session is going to be focused on some questions around the theme of communication. And in that, we have 3 focus areas, actually, because communication is so broad. We're going to be talking around active listening. We're going to be talking as well around how to adjust your communication style for your audience. And we're also going to be talking about storytelling. These are the 3 techniques in communication that we're really going to be zoning into today. But then if you have any broader questions around communication, you can use Slido to pre-register them. And if you're on Slido, or if you've just joined us now, I'm going to share my screen one more time so that you can all see the QR code that you can bring up. And there you can see some pre-registered questions. So have a browse of the pre-registered questions. If there's anything in there that you think is really good and really worth answering, give it a thumbs up so it goes to the top of the list, because that's how we're going to be addressing the questions, from the top down. But if there's something on there that we haven't covered and you really want the answer to it, ask your question. You can ask it anonymously, because there might be other people that want to know the same answer to the same question, and they will also upvote your question. So please be interactive and collaborate with us as we go through this session. So scan this QR code, look at the link in Zoom chat to open Slido to let us know what you want to have answered in the second half of the session. Right, so let's jump into it now. So my first question is actually around a really practical, like, what is your number one tip for anyone that wants to improve their communication skills? I'm going to throw that to all of you. Let's go like really quick round. Number one tip to anyone that wants to improve their communication skills. Jens, why don't you start?
So in very brief, I think to really understand, get an idea of your audience is a very critical aspect.
Thank you, Jens. More on?
I mean, for me, it's very important, I think, to get to a level of a good communication is practicing, of course. Mm-hmm. And sounds funny, but maybe making mistakes as well. So to learn from it and practice as much as possible. Best would be with friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a safe space. Thank you, Mohan. And Jeroen?
You will hear me say this a few times during this call. Keep it short. Keep it simple.
Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid, right? KISS is the acronym that I'm familiar with. Yes, thank you. And Amra?
I would say, don't be distracted. Listen with intention. If your mouth is open, you're not listening. You're not focused on the person that you're interacting with. So I would say, don't get distracted. Really focus on the conversation.
I really like that, and that takes us into talking about active listening. So thank you for that, Amra. You know, they say that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we should be listening twice as much as we are talking. And one of the techniques around communication that I want to dive into is active listening. So the first thing is, like, for those of us that are joining and maybe aren't familiar with the term active listening, what is it, and why actually is listening important when it comes to communicating? Because when you talk about communicating, you might be thinking about speaking, but actually active listening is such an important topic. So Morwan, can you talk to that point?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, you mentioned it already. Active listening is a very powerful tool, and active listening is as you said it, as it says, it's listening. And listening means we all have the urge and to answer or to give a solution. And active listening is about listening and understanding what somebody is saying, and not to respond immediately.
Yeah. How can you show that like you've understood what someone's saying? Because sometimes I'm just thinking about, sometimes you might be in a meeting and someone might not be speaking. It might look like they're listening, but actually they're not actively listening. They're sort of maybe doing some emails or checking their phone. So how can they show how can somebody show that they're actively listening?
I
Well,
can
go ahead. Sorry.
go ahead.
Amra.
The active listening is about giving the full attention, as it said. So remove all distractions like laptops, phones. Body language is also one thing to show how the people are actively listening. And another one is ask open-ended questions. No yes, no questions. Ask why questions or W questions, so to say. And last but not least, I would say, be patient and do not interrupt. So let the person speak and end their sentences.
Thanks, Morwan. And Amra, you had something to add to that, didn't you?
Yeah, I just wanted to, just add briefly, active listening really is concentrating fully on the individual that you're interacting with, right? So don't multitask, be present, be in that moment and really focus on the conversation, on the individual. When you are doing that, when you're concentrating on the speaker, when you are understanding the message, right? When you're observing the body language and you're responding thoughtfully, all of that builds trust, right? And it also ensures clarity. And most importantly, it reduces miscommunication, right? It reduces the going back and forth and really trying to figure out what were they trying to say, right? If you are in the moment, it really makes a big difference. Also, one of the things that I've learned a long time ago, and this actually came from my late father, but he would always say, and I remember not understanding this fully when I was younger, of course, but as I grew older, this message became more and more clear. But he would always say, I've never met an individual that I didn't learn something from. So go into a conversation assuming that you have something to learn from that person. Everyone knows something that you don't. So go in prepared to be amazed, to really pick something up, to walk away with something that you were not, privy to in the past. So all of that is active listening, really paying attention and giving the attention to individual with whom you're engaging. So those are important things for me.
Yeah, and there's an FBI hostage negotiator. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Chris Voss, but he's got an amazing book on negotiation. It's called Never Split the Difference. But one piece of it is around active listening and actually summarizing what you've heard somebody say. And what you're looking for is for them to say exactly like, that's right, and showing that actually they're agreeing with you to show that you've actually captured what they've said. So summarizing as well is like a really good technique to show that you're digesting and feeding back what you've heard, and also to drum out actually if you've misunderstood something. That's really important when it comes to active listening. But I'm interested in an example, actually. So I'm going to put you both on the spot, Amra and Morwan. I don't know who wants to answer this, or maybe both of you do. Yeah. So have you got an example where active listening actually changed the outcome of a conversation?
Yes, I have a great example. I had just joined a new organization many years ago. And I unfortunately inherited a very long list of questions from the FDA. They had submitted a submission, and the agency came back with a number of questions, clarifications around the submission and the product. And I came into this 30-page report that I needed to now address, right? And not knowing the product, not knowing the relationship that this organization has had with the FDA in the past, we kind of ended up starting with going back and forth. And it really was getting frustrating, I think, on both our ends. I had proposed that we meet in person. We were actually doing a show close to where this individual resided. And I said, would you like to come out? We'll bring the product out and you can have an opportunity to engage with the product. We can get to know each other a little bit better. And he actually did. He took that on. He came to the trade show. We had displayed the product. It was very easy for me to demonstrate, and the engineers that were working on the product to demonstrate what the change was and how we were going about implementing that and relating that to how it was written in the submission originally. And it took less than 2 weeks after that to get that approval through. So it really sometimes is a matter of thinking outside of the box and thinking about ways to engage the individual in a way that maybe they haven't been engaged with you in the past. So I would say that's also a form of active listening, right? And also bringing examples and really sharing with them hands-on, this is what we are talking about. This is the project. So that's been really successful. That's
very nice.
Very often, actually.
And that's actually pointing to a theme that I know Jeroen is really passionate about, which is around picking up the phone and actually having the conversation. Can you imagine, like, if that had been emails forwards and backwards, which I know we're going to come to that in just a second. Moan, do you have an example that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have one. I have several, but I choose to take like a short one where I had a conversation recently where a colleague came into my office and she was complaining about somebody not doing his work. And then after asking, asking questions, why this person doesn't do his work, or what do you mean exactly by what is not doing this work, it came out that this person was like 9 months. He knows that we have 9 months time. And I said, well, what do you want me to do about it? Do you want me, or did you talk to him? He said, no, I didn't talk to him. I said, well, are you here to I said, I have to talk to him. Do you want me to talk to him? And then it turned out that first of all, she was just afraid about keeping a timeline. And the second thing was that turned around, that from this complaint situation where she just had to release some pressure, right? It turned around into, well, no, you should not talk to him, let me talk to him. So basically, what I liked on this example is that within the conversation, the problem was solved through the conversation, and the solution was already there in this person who came to complain, basically, and just to listen, right? Because sometimes people don't come to get a solution, but to get somebody to reflect, sparring partner, and to listen and to understand.
Yeah, and to feel heard. That's a really, really important point. You know, sometimes as leaders, it's not about providing the answers, but it's about asking the questions and making people feel heard in the points that they want to make. So let's talk a little bit about adjusting your message based on your audience, because this is an advanced technique of communication, perhaps, and one that maybe not everybody has thought about the importance of why actually we should be doing this. So I want to bring Jeroen into the conversation. Obviously, Jeroen, with the perspective of global HR business partner, you're dealing with people, you know, all over the world in all different functions. So I guess my first question that I'd like to put to you is, like, why is it important to adjust your communication based on the people that you're speaking to? And then what factors should you consider when you're doing that?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, you have to assume that different people in different levels have different knowledge levels, right? So it's very different. I work across the globe, anything from blue collar to executive. So I tailor my approach to whoever I meet, right? And I do my homework in advance. Then, of course, secondly, there's such things as cultural aspect. We talk about direct communication, indirect communication, very different across the globe, right? So I think in order to be efficient, but also to show, in a way, empathy to the audience, you adapt your style to whatever works best in that specific situation, is what I would say.
And so what things do you need to consider when adapting your style? So you say, for example, you do your homework in advance. So what are you looking for when you do your homework and thinking about how you're going to convey your message?
It kind of depends on whether I know the audience, yes or no, right? If I have previous knowledge, then that's okay, right? But I try to grasp very quickly who I'm speaking to. Are they asking a lot of questions the moment I start? Probably they want direct, immediate feedback. Are they sitting back waiting for me to finish my sentence and then the questions come, right? So I always tailor to whoever I feel I have in front of me. I ask open questions if I feel that I'm not coming through. Are you getting this? So same as active listening, I check in, I reflect. Am I getting my point across? Are we speaking on the same level? Sometimes you need to move quick, right? Again, if you have the experience of working with somebody before, then you kind of know in advance who you're dealing with.
Elena, I'd be happy to add just a little to that. I really agree with that, and I think that's a great point. But maybe an example that I use with my students often when we talk about communication is, especially in this medical device ecosystem, right, and pharma ecosystem, the life sciences in general, really knowing who your audience is and what they care about, right? What is their subject matter expertise, right? For example, if you're talking with marketing, you know that there's going to be a sales conversation, so highlighting sales. If you're talking to quality folks, you need to make sure that you talk about compliance. When you're talking to regulatory, right, it's about submissions and approvals. Operations will care about inventory and what those numbers are, right? So I think just really knowing what that outcome of that cross-functional team is, if you're engaging with them, is really one way to sort of strategize and really focus on the conversation on, because those are going to be the exact things that those are going to be the red flags. That's what they're listening to, right? They're going to be attuned to those keywords.
Yeah, and if I could just summarize, Elena, for me, clearly, one size does not fit all.
Yeah.
It rarely does, right?
Yeah. So it's about adapting based on the people that you're speaking to, understanding what their function is, and also their seniority level as well, because you might not have as much time, right? And if you're dealing with an executive person, they might not want all the detail. They might want the high level, and let them ask for the detail. And actually knowing that before you go in, especially if you're pitching an idea or something, asking for some budget or something like that, it's good to know exactly who you're talking to, what they want, so that you can be prepared in advance. So do your homework essentially is one of the messages, Jeroen. Thank you for that. So do Morwan, Jens, do either of you have any tips on how to assess the communication preferences of the people that you're dealing with? We've spoken about function. We've spoken a little bit about seniority. Are there any other pieces of advice either of you can share? Jens, you're nodding your head. Maybe let's go to you first.
Yeah, maybe two aspects. And one topic we probably come to that aspect in a moment, which is understanding or have an understanding about the cultural background of those individuals, and potentially reaching out to some of them in case of uncertainty to better understand. That's what I would see as one aspect. And then really coming also back to active listening, observing the audience throughout a meeting, throughout a presentation, and then adapt your approach.
And when it comes to the cultural aspects, is there anything specifically any advice that you have around cultural aspects?
Yeah, I think there are many. As an example, in one way, if someone, for example, stays very calm throughout a meeting, that might not necessarily mean that that individual is not interested. It might be perceived that way, I'm generalizing a little bit, in the US or maybe in the Western world, but probably not at all in the Asian Pacific world. And those things, I think, are very, very important to consider and to at least be aware about.
And Morwan, I know that you spent some time in Japan. So do you have any insights as well between the differences when it comes to cultural differences in communication, and what to look out for any of us who perhaps are leading more global organizations?
For me, it was very, very difficult because I'm also from Germany, and I'm used to be very direct. Even for a German, I'm very direct. So getting into a country where I had to understand how the communication works and what's the mindset. And one difficult thing was, for example, silence. In Japan, for example, if you ask a question, then they take the time and they think about it, and it's getting into for normal people, I would say, or for Western people, it comes to it feels uncomfortable, and then you want to interrupt or just, oh, did you understand, or ask questions again and again. But being silent at some point is very important. And also I learned it here in my management role, that silence is a very powerful tool. When the people are starting thinking, you can see people starting thinking and what's going on right now, and then the urge to speak out and to say something. And also when it comes to when we talk about not only cultural differences, but also within the company, different functions. I give you an example, which is a beautiful example from my point of view, is we had a town hall meeting. We have town hall meetings every month, right? Where the CEO speaks about general topics, news, etc. And there are all functions in there. There's marketing, there's sales, there's quality, there's operations, production, quality control. And the message is the message is always very generic. And what we started to do is, because people came to me and said, well, is this important to me? Do I have to join these meetings? It's a waste of time because the topics are not bothering me at all. So I said, well, let's have a meeting after the meeting for 30 minutes, inviting my RAQ team and translating this into RAQ. What does it mean for us, right? Because the message is different for sales, right? It's also different for RA. If we talk about increasing sales or increasing revenue, then it's a different message for different measures for sales than for regulatory affairs. For regulatory affairs, or quality means getting the product out, right? And being compliant. And I think it's a beautiful example because it's within one company, even within the same culture.
Yeah, because the different functions have different priorities and different ways of seeing things. Does anybody else have any examples that they can share of this in practice? Jens?
Maybe I can share an example. I once had the opportunity to lead a team in Asia Pacific. And in terms of communication, I basically requested and communicated that I wanted to create a balanced scorecard and that I wanted to have a monthly review, a cross-functional review of this balanced scorecard. So I communicated this to my team over there, and I sensed reluctance. And I then picked the leader of that team and asked, hey, did I sense that correctly? And she then said, oh, can we do something different? Can we, for example, just the two of us review the balance score sheet? And there was really fear ultimately of losing face. So this was really something which was very helpful to me, and that also helped me to adjust my communication and approach in that regard. That I created a safe environment. I provided a lot of context, why we are doing that, what will be the perceived or wished outcome, and so on and so forth. And we had a stepwise approach, first with a few individuals, then just with the core team. And throughout learning, communicating in that and in safe environment, we gradually invited other functions as well. And throughout the meeting, I purposely encouraged people to raise their hands, to share information, not just the successes. And it really, ultimately, it was a great success, but it really took me several months to get there.
Mm. And I really like one thing that you said where you said that you sensed reluctance and you actually directly addressed that and asked, is that what I'm sensing? Because actually there's so much value in nonverbal, and if you actually lean into it and tap into it and question it, you're actually going to find a whole load of information behind that. And I think often I see people really glossing over something, and then later on something comes up and it's like, oh, I had a feeling that person wasn't going to buy or wasn't on board or had an issue, but I didn't want to directly address it because they never told me. And actually asking and calling out, I'm sensing this, talk to me, facilitates that person to then open up and share the information with you. And again, it's about that communication and getting them to connect, so that's a beautiful example. Jeroen, have you got anything? I'm sure.
Well, yeah, to kind of, and I know this is not just about meetings, but just a few cents on Jens's meetings. I think it's very easy to read the energy in the room. Yeah. And I think we all fall into the trap of, I still have 3 pages to go, right? And 20 minutes left, I'll just continue, but you lose the energy, right? You lose track of the people. It's not going to matter what you present. Sometimes people joke, hey, they've given me the time slot after lunch. It works that way, right? People have had dinner, they have a sugar rush, and it's hard to pitch, right? Or you get the last session of the day, right? So be careful and be conscious there. Better to put in a quick pause, right? Refresh, do a quick energizer, whatever it is, because that is, I think, body language is one of the absolute giveaways in any communication vehicle.
Thanks for that, Jeroen. And on that note, Amra,
I was just, if it's okay, just
sure,
one.
Sure.
What we're hearing, I think, is, whether you're talking about engaging with folks who live in other countries and being culturally sensitive and really knowing how they operate, or you're dealing with, different levels of leadership in your organization, you have to know your audience. It goes back to really understanding who you're speaking with. And you also need to make sure that you go in with what you're expecting to get out of that, right? So if you're talking to senior leaders, you cannot go in with a problem unless you have a solution already identified, and maybe a plan A and a plan B, right? If you're talking to, a younger generation that maybe studies things differently, right? You need to make sure that you talk about, maybe if you're talking about training, maybe there needs to be a component of YouTube type training or something on TikTok, right? That they will absorb in a way that makes sense to them. So you really need to understand who you're speaking with, and you need to go in with, what am I getting out of this, right? What is my expectation? What is my goal? And then you need to sort of prepare that weave that into the conversation as well.
So it's about being a chameleon. As leaders, our role is to be a chameleon, depending on the audience that we're dealing with, and adapt accordingly. And I'm going to take Jeroen's advice, and I'm going to take a quick pause here, guys, to give our panelists a chance to have a sip of water and regather their thoughts. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to bring up the QR code that's going to take you into Slido, because in approximately 10 minutes or so, we're going to go into the live Q&A session. And in the live Q&A session, I'm going to be reading out the questions that have been coming through on Slido. And the way that we're going to be addressing those questions is by the most popular questions first, working backwards. So if you've joined us late and you haven't opened Slido, scan this QR code, open up Slido, you will see immediately that there are already a number of questions that have been put in there. And scan through. If there's any that you like the look of, give it a thumbs up. You can thumbs up all of them if you want, or just the one you like. But if there's any questions that haven't been asked that you want the answers to, guys, look at the quality of the people that we have on this session. Can you imagine getting one-to-one coaching with them and how much that would cost you? We're doing it right now for free. So this is your opportunity to put your questions in. We will answer as many as we can in the second half of the session. And our goal is to provide value to you through your leadership journey. So I'm going to stop my screen share, and we're going to go back into the conversation to talk about the third technique, which is around storytelling. So first of all, I would like to know, how can storytelling be used in business or even leadership to drive action and inspire change? I'm going to throw that first to Jeroen.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, the purpose of storytelling is to build some sort of emotional connection, right? So you resonate with people, that they understand why and how you are doing things, right? So they understand part of the mission, and then that builds hopefully engagement within all those team members to follow what you're trying to achieve, right? So I think that's a difference between proper storytelling versus, can I say, death by PowerPoint, Elena?
You definitely can, and thank you for your directness.
All right.
Okay, cool. And so then my follow-up question is that then maybe Amra, you could help with this. So what are some techniques that somebody can use to actually become a storyteller?
Again, we're talking to an audience here who is likely in life sciences, right? So a lot of access to regulatory folks, regulatory individuals. So our storytellers. If you're not a storyteller, you're likely not a good regulatory person. I'm sorry to put it that way, but you need to be able to express the change, right? The product, to define it all in a document and share that with someone who has never seen a product in person, right? Who's likely never touched it, that has no idea other than what you're describing in your story. So you need to take them, into a different world where they can absorb the information, read the book, and really know what it's about, right? So emotionally engaging is really important. Good stories really make complex ideas simplified, right? It connects with an audience on a personal level, but it also motivates them by providing context and providing meaning to things. So stories, they evoke empathy, right? They make messages more impactful, and then that's really what it's all about. So the better you are at expressing yourself on paper and telling that story, the better outcome and faster approval and clearance you will receive from your regulators if you're on the regulatory side. I'll give you one example. I know a lot of organizations do this, but when I was at Medtronic really would pride themselves on doing these holiday events where they would bring patients into the audience, right? Into a session and into a podium stage, and these patients would share stories about how that product impacted their life, right? Changed the outcome of their trajectory of life in general. And the way that they made that personal, because it was personal, and it's not just the individual that was impacted that the product was used on, but it was the rest of the family. A lot of times you will hear from parents, right, whose children maybe have diabetes, and now this product has made a huge difference. It makes them feel better safer about that child being on their own, right, and not having to worry about the glucose levels going all over the place because they can track it on their phone. So when they make that personal and really share the overall impact, I think there's no price on that, right? Those stories are the ones that I'm carrying with me today. I can probably remember majority of the ones that I heard because they were so impactful. We would share tissues around because everyone would get tear-eyed, and that's not something that goes away very quickly. So personalize, and really engage in the storytelling as best as you can. But I think that the better of a storyteller, the better of a regulatory professional you are.
I really like that connection to regulatory as well. So thank you for that, Amra. So then my question is to maybe to all of you, do you have an example of someone who's done it really well? I mean, Amra's already spoken about Medtronic generally as a company, bringing in patients as sort of case studies. But is there a specific story, someone that's had a particular impact on you at some point in your career through storytelling? Jeroen?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. And by the way, Amra, we do the exact same. So we do the exact same in meetings, but also we take it a step further in every business meeting. We always ask somebody else to do a commit story, something that they have either done at work or somebody in their family or friends that has used our products and for that sense has bring a little bit of sense and purpose into what we do, right? That is not all about business. Do I have a story on somebody that has influenced me in that sense? Yes, probably one person I looked up to, and that has always amazed me. I think it's a skill. Very, very senior person in my previous life. I used to work at GE, right? Mm-hmm. We had a lot of very, can I say, senior executives, and it would always surprise me that the more senior they were, the more simplified their story and their messages, and they would come up with one or two stories that would be very personal, as in how they landed in the job that they landed, how they built their career on something that might have happened to them in their childhood. I remember our senior legal counsel basically explaining his parents were Russian immigrants and moved to the US at an early age, but because of the accent, the cultural aspect at that point in time, the 50s, 60s in the US, right, were discriminated against. And that put such a sense of injustice into his character that he ultimately became a lawyer, and a fantastic lawyer, right? His whole purpose was around fighting that injustice in general. I thought that was amazing, right? And very personal connection immediately to Amra's point when you hear that story. You can relate to that, yeah?
The origin stories are always
right.
Great. Yeah, for sure. And also as leaders, like you can talk more about your story as well. I find that speaking to people in the industry, when speaking to candidates, the leaders that people tend to really connect with are the ones that do give away a little bit of themselves, that are a little bit more personal in the way that they communicate. They share about their private life or their personal life, and they don't have such a strong barrier. And those are the ones that I think that I have seen have been really able to like bring their people along with them on the journey. Jens.
Yeah, and I think that reminds me on an approach I could observe at one of my former superiors, which I found it very powerful. Actually, it's showing weakness. I was not long with my role at that time, and then my superior approached me and said, "Hey, Jens, can you lead that project?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. So what's the background?" And she said, "Well, I used to lead it over the past couple of months, half a year, but I completely messed it up. Can you help me?" And that really created so many things. First of all, I felt very comfortable to jump into that. And then she really created a safe and trustful working relationship very quickly. And I felt really encouraged to, in a very straightforward way, also have a chat with her around things where I felt, oh, that was not optimal. So I think what I'm using, and I find this very powerful and helpful as well, really speaking to the team, saying, "Hey, listen, guys, this is not my area of expertise. I need your help, and I'm struggling with that." And then you can sometimes there's an immediate change in dynamics in a meeting. So those things can be mind-blowing.
Thank you for that, Jens. It's true. Sometimes showing weakness can actually enable you to really rally the team around, because not everybody has all the answers all the time, ultimately. So one final question before we go into the Q&A, which is around feedback. So we did see in some of the pre-registered questions that people were asking, okay, but how do you go about getting feedback or knowing actually like how your communication style even is to start with? So my question for you is, how do you measure and get feedback on your communication style? And I'm going to go around, and I'm interested for everybody to give me one tip on how you get feedback on your communication style. I'm going to start with Jerome.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the cultural aspect comes into play, guys, and I'm not even kidding. Can I say our Dutch folks are known to be quite direct, right? You'll get feedback even if you don't ask, so that's the good thing. But all jokes aside, that does make it easy for me to ask, and I ask the question all the time. I typically always, or most of the times, finish my emails with a sentence that just says, "Hey, makes sense, right? Does it make sense what I'm saying, right?" And I literally mean it. Like, if it doesn't make sense, you just tell me, right? So being receptive to feedback, if you will, I think that is the key. The way we would typically say that, and then think about this, guys. Feedback is a gift, right? Because it's an opportunity to do something different, better, more constructive in the future. So very open to receive feedback, and I do ask it all the time, also because it builds a relationship of trust, right? If I'm as maybe a senior manager speaking to somebody who's in my team, that vulnerability that Jens talked about, I think that's a very powerful tool.
So ask for feedback, and something even as simple as just putting it in your email. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Invites the conversation around feedback. Amra, what about you?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like Jerome and I are kind of one and the same in a lot of answers here. But I think if you go in and when you ask for feedback, and if you turn that response into a positive, right? So rather than seeing that as a challenge, as being challenged, and in a negative way, maybe look at that as an opportunity, right? Rather than a challenge. So maybe an opportunity to do even better in the future, rather than being challenged that you're not good enough or that you haven't done well enough. So I think turning that feedback into a positive rather than a negative would be one way to put this.
Thanks, Amra. And Jens?
Yeah, thanks. There are so many things to that question. So I think measuring, maybe one simple piece is if you send out an email, you are requesting information. I think one aspect to think about is, did I actually receive the information I've asked for in the format I wanted the information? And probably sometimes you don't get what you were requesting to, and that might be some sort of measuring. I also agree with my colleagues that it's so hard. It can be so hard to get constructive, honest feedback. So I think secondary feedback lines, building your network, asking people, hey, what are the talks on the hallway about that meeting, and so on and so forth, might be one way, but also make it easy when requesting or asking for feedback. Phrase the sentence or the question in a way to make it simple and welcoming for the individuals to respond to it. For example, could you tell me one thing I could improve? Something like that.
Yeah, I had that in my mind, Jens. That's exactly the way to ask for feedback, because too often people ask really general. So like, hey, can you just give me some feedback? And it's too broad, it's too open, and also for the other person, often they're kind of put on the spot and they can't really remember, so actually to ask immediately after a meeting, for example, hey, what's one thing I could do differently next time or better next time, or one thing you loved and one thing I could do better, to make it a little bit easier for them to give that feedback to you. But be really intentional and specific. That's what I have found works really, really well when it comes to trying to get that feedback. Morwan, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, of course. I agree with all of you, and that's a very good input, I think. But I think also feedback, the higher you get as a manager, the less feedback you get. And what you have to build is, so trust doesn't come with feedback. I think that you have to build the environment that the people trust you, that they can give you the right feedback, that you have the environment that people can say and maybe criticize you, right? And that's important, I believe.
I definitely think so. And how do you set up a safe space, especially when it comes to, as a leader, making a space for people to be able to criticize you? How do you do that?
Sorry, Marwan, I don't want to steal your thunder. You go ahead.
Okay. I try to being authentic, and that feedback is never something, it's nothing negative, because feedback is perceived sometimes as something very negative. But I honestly believe that positive feedback is nice, but it doesn't help you to grow. Yeah. So that's what I try to tell the people, that there is no negative feedback. Feedback is for you to grow, for you to see where you are at this point of time with this topic, and to give you a kind of an anchor. And some people, for myself, it's very important to receive feedback, because I know where I am and where I have to navigate to get a better person, to become a better leader. Because without feedback, you just do whatever you think it's right, and at some point nobody tells you that maybe you went the wrong way.
Yeah, really valid point. And on the topic of feedback, to everybody who's listening, we will be sending out a survey requesting some feedback on the session. So please take the time to fill them out and let us know how these sessions are going for you, and if you're liking the format, and if you also have any tips for us, one thing we could do to improve for the next session, that would be really, really good. Okay, so we're going to now go into the Q&A section of the session. Before we dive into the Q&A, we had a look at the pre-registered questions, and there were a couple that we felt were really important that we addressed. So we're going to start with a couple of these pre-registered questions, and then we're going to go into the Slido and work backwards from the Slido. So to our panelists, you're going to see, and anyone in the Zoom, you're going to see the question pop up on the chat, as well as I'm going to read it out to give you all a chance to think. And then I don't need everybody to answer the question, so maybe one or two people, if you've got something to add. We're going to try, the goal of this section is to try and get through as many questions as possible. So the first question that we have, and you should see that appearing in the chat in a second, is what do you think about straightforwardness in email communication? Ideas to keep the email clear and concise without coming across as unkind. PS, my email communications, which were straightforward and focused on problem solving, were criticized as grumpy. Is this how people perceive it? So, Jerome, I want to start with you, Because I want your feedback just generally on email communication and this particular situation. What advice would you have?
Sure. Well, my advice, first instance, very simple, right? Phone first, email second, right? Keep that in mind. These emails, they might go across touch different cultures. Not everybody's going to appreciate your style. They're always open for interpretation. How many times have you received one of those emails? You pick up the phone second, and then you figure out what the actual issue is. Turn it around. Keep it simple. I use email a lot, of course, same as everybody else, but not after I have spoken to the group or the person. And then maybe I use the email just to reflect what we discussed, right? Did we capture everything that we meant to capture, right? Do we know who the clear stakeholder is, who the owner is of all that stuff, right? But start with a phone call first, email second. Big red flag for me, Elena, is when I got copied in on an email train that has already gone across the globe, right? And then somebody decides to copy me in. I stopped the debate immediately, set up a call with whoever needs to be on that phone, right, and clear the issue right then and there. There's nothing you can't fix in a 30-minute phone call, is my idea.
Back to what we were talking about at the beginning of like the value of directs and having like speaking to someone on the phone, getting them in front of you. So much can be lost in email communication. And when you're reading an email, someone once said to me, when you're reading an email, you're reading it in your own voice,
right,
not their voice. And so that comes with your bias, your way of thinking, your intonation. And so what somebody means when they're sending an email isn't always how it's received. And that's the same as when you're sending an email to someone. So I love the idea of just picking up the phone. Does anyone else have anything to add on the topic of email? Amra?
Yeah, I was going to say, better yet, if you do have an opportunity, if you're in the same location, try and do that meeting in person, right? Or better yet, if it's going to be a tough conversation, buy them a cup of coffee, take them out, for lunch, have a conversation, warm them up a little bit before you get into kind of some of that tougher language, because, food goes a long way in these instances. So I think the more in-person conversations that you can have, the more, personalized that you can make it. Again, go in with intention, right? Really make sure that you give that person the attention that they need, and go in with what your ask is going to be and what you're anticipating back from that individual.
Yeah, thank you. And I like the tip on food, food going a long way. So that's always good. So the next one that I wanted to pick up on was any tips on how to have difficult conversations, because obviously as leaders, it's not always rosy. Sometimes you do need to have those tough conversations. So does anybody have any tips on how to go about those conversations? Maybe Jens, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. So I think it depends on the situation. So for example, in one environment I can think about, well, being empathic, being authentic, being yourself, but also being concise and clear. This is what I would put out up front. And then I think it depends a little bit on the situation. As an example, describing the situation. Be clear in the situation, be clear on the challenges, be clear on consequences if we act or we are not acting. That's, in my view, a common theme in some of the difficult conversations. When it comes to, for example, misbehavior, these type of things, I think a good way to think about things is there is actually perception and truth. It's very hard to get, and everybody has his or her own perspective on the event or the story or whatever. And I think that's very important to keep in mind. And by reflecting on this, I think one way to approach this is to talk about your own feelings. Well, I perceived, I've sensed, that was my impression. Am I right? How did you experience that situation? And that might create a good foundation for a good conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So actually leading with your own feelings and then offering to the other person to give their perspective. Amra?
Yeah, I was going to say, I love that. I think that's spot on. But also, we talked about body language and observing body language. There's also something to be said about the body language that you reflect, right? So if your arms are crossed, you're going in showing them that you already seeing the situation as negative, right? You need to be open about your body language too, and really observe and make sure that you don't go in showcasing a negative reflection right off the bat. You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You need to sit down and have an honest conversation. Again, be in the moment and really focus, turn your phone on, and really try to understand their point of view. And yeah, just that body language on your end too needs to be reflected.
Thank you so much for that, talking about body language, because that's also something that we haven't gone into today in so much detail. I think that probably warrants its own Future Leader series, just talking about body language. There's so much there. But now let's go into the Slido, because we have a number of questions here. So this is going to be a quick fire round. So I'm going to read out the question, and if you can answer it, just jump in and give your feedback. If you've got something to add, you can do that. But if not, we'll move on to the next question. I'm just going to share my screen for everybody who perhaps joined late or doesn't have access to the Slido. So on this QR code that hopefully is coming up on the screen. Is it there on the screen? I think something just froze. Hold on a second. So if you scan this QR code, you should be able to bring up Slido, and you should see on there a number of questions that we're going to start with, all by anonymous, but nobody's put their name. That's totally fine. So the first question is, can workplace communication be truly inclusive if managers have more power and lower level employees feel afraid to speak openly? So I'm going to read it one more time. Can workplace communication be truly inclusive if managers have more power and lower level employees feel afraid to speak openly?
I actually have an example I can share with you. I recently had an opportunity to interview a great leader in an organization. He's a head of quality for a major global company. And he shared with me how he lets himself be vulnerable with his staff. And he actually goes out even to the clean rooms, and he sits down with the staff and he engages in conversation. He has coffee with them. He sits down and sometimes has lunch with them. And in one of those instances, he was able to gather from one of the clean room staff how they've noticed the colorant has changed in one of the products, and they stopped production immediately and were able to catch that there was a mistake, there was something that was going off before it became a recall, a major concern for the organization. So when you take the time, when you sit down and when you let yourself be a little bit vulnerable and really allow them to build that trust with you, you will not only make an impact on that individual, you will make an impact on your organization as well. So absolutely, you can do that.
Thank you, Amra.
Yeah.
Does anyone have anything to add to that point, or we move on?
I think it's what you said, Amra, is 100% right. Being also here as a managing director for a site which with 150 people, and from production, from QC, a clean room, etc., it's your own decision how you come across to the people, right? Yeah. And if somebody decides they want to play the role of the boss and not communicating or getting to the same level of communication, then it's their decision. When I just today, it was sunny today, and I took time to stand outside with my colleagues from production. I was just chatting, they were smoking. I took 10 minutes, and this 10 minutes doesn't hurt at all. But it gives so much value to the people, and just chatting, nothing about work, just about how you're doing, how the kids, like private stuff. And this is really valuable. Or just going to the production site and walking through the production, say hi to the people, helps so much for them to open up, because the barrier is not with me. I don't have the barrier. The barrier is there. They cannot speak upwards, kind of. So this is maybe difficult. And you have to build, as I said before, you have to build the environment for the people to be able to speak with you.
Exactly. And it's not always the case that power dynamic. I mean, it can be blurred in certain circumstances, depending on the kind of leadership that you want to create with your team as well. Okay, next question is quite a tactical one, but I just want to get your thoughts on it because it's actually had a high number of votes, which is it okay to ask workers to install work communication apps like email and chat on their personal phones? So this is quite a tactical question, but just give us your 2 cents on that. A yes or a no?
It's a good one. I honestly not a question I necessarily think about, but we do. We have implemented it, and I have been used to that for a long time. I remember back in my GE days, we actually at a certain point in time started limiting the amount of data available because of the data privacy rules that came up. But since then, and I'm talking about a few years ago, it's pretty standard in where I come from, at least.
Yeah, I would say yes, unless there's legal implications.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one aspect to look into this is, and I think this is a powerful tool as well to discuss with the team how to work together, like to creating a charter. And I think the product is not the main thing; it's really the conversation and learning about each other. How do we as a team would like to work together, including how do we want to communicate, through which channels, and that might be one way to also get the team's perspective in here as well.
Yeah.
I think you can ask for it, but we have a lot of people in our company who has a company phone, but some of them don't have. So you can ask them to install it on a personal phone, and that's their choice, right? You cannot force the people. But people are different, right? People say, well, no, it's my private phone. I would do it on my private phone. I actually have it on my private phone. Just to be informed, to be up to date, and to just chatting. We have also a group chat with the whole company. We have separate chats. And I think also the weekend, you say, well, have a nice weekend and send a picture of a glass of wine. And this loosens up it's fun to work with, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's really common nowadays. You know, gone are the days where people walk around with 2 phones and stuff like that, 2 laptops, 2 phones. I don't know, maybe 2 laptops, but definitely not 2 phones. Okay, so the next question. So maybe for our regulatory participants. So how to translate regulatory complex requirement strategies into simple but clear messages for directors who may not have any expertise. So how do you take a complex regulatory topic and make it simple, essentially, is the question. Who can take that one?
I can take that one. So, again, knowing who your audience is, getting some information on how much do they know, right, about regulatory, and really being informed about who they are as an individual, how much background do they have. Maybe they worked in regulatory in the past, right? Maybe that's where their career started. So maybe they have a basic understanding, but there always has to be a level of education within that, right? So you need to start with, this is what we're talking about. So you need to bring it down a level so that individual can understand. I heard recently there was a study done that said that an average person can talk at 225 words per minute, but we listen at 500 words per minute. Wow. So that means, half of it we actually fill in with our own thoughts. So don't allow that. Really make sure that you, again, know your audience and know the level of understanding they have, to whatever extent you can, educate yourself on. So if you're talking to a leader, talk to someone who reports to that person. See if you can get to know them through that individual a little bit better. Make sure you know, what is their learning style, right? And how can you address that and bring up a topic that may be different, but in a way that they can understand it. So I guess it goes back to knowing your audience and really being informed on their learning style.
Yeah, I would echo this as well. And I think putting yourselves in the shoes of the audience, for example, regulatory topic, business, commercial type of environment, and the question, well, how does that relate to your environment? How does it relate to your guys? How does it relate to your customers? And then you might find nice linkages, and that might help to get the attention and the awareness as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Elena, even sorry, if I can just jump in as a non-regulatory person, actually, first of all, I think it's a fantastic question. Why am I purposely jumping in? This question makes me smile because this is not a regulatory question, yeah? This could be a finance question or an IT person or an HR person asking the same question. How do you bring your content expertise of whatever job you're in to an understandable level to whoever the audience is, right? Which we talked about in the beginning. So it's a fantastic question, but trust me, you're not alone in this one, right? Whether you're in regulatory affairs somewhere else, you're not unique.
And do you have any tips, Jeroen, in terms of like what works well then in order to simplify your message?
Well, this is, I think, first of all, that's an acquired skill that you learn over time, right? I talked about this in the beginning. How do you bring complexity back to a simple concept, right? There's a fantastic verb in German, which hopefully half the audience will understand more when you will get this. It's called "In der Beschränkung zeigt sich der Meister." You can keep things simple. That shows a certain level of expertise, right? But it's not easy to do. But challenge yourself in that one, right? Next time you do a presentation, you have 10 pages. Could you do it in 4? Could you do it in 2? What if you only get 15 minutes with an executive? Could you do it in 1? Right? It's that is, I think, the basis of that question, which very hard to do. I find it difficult to do, to be honest. But it's not unique to regulatory affairs, trust me.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. Morvan, you had something to add as well to that.
Jeroen just read my mind. I just wanted to say that what Jeroen said at the beginning of that, that's an hour ago, he said, keep it simple. And I 100% agree, because the attention, the length of attention is not very long, and keep it simple is, I think, the best advice. And you don't know if you don't know who you're talking with, or who do you explain, what you have to explain is, where are you with your knowledge level? Where are you? Where do I have to start? Mm-hmm. And I mean, if I have to start really at the scratch, then I don't go up to the highest level. I just explain the basics, right? If the person already have knowledge, then I start at the knowledge point. So it always depends on who you're explaining it.
Yeah. And it's like, I can't remember where I learned this, but one framework that I thought was really interesting was the what, so what, now what. So what's the thing? So what? Why does it matter? And then now what? And you can use this framework in particular when you're dealing with senior people and you want to get a point across. You don't need to go into all the details, but you say what the thing is, why does that matter to them, and what is the solution or the next steps that you're proposing in order to move the conversation forward. So there's a little tidbit from me as well. Let's keep going, guys, because we have more questions and everything is jumping all over the screen for me. So, okay, the next question we have is around, so it's, what are the best communication practices to gain visibility across functions and hierarchies? So I want to take this question a little bit more broad and say, how do you get visibility across different functions and hierarchies? Has anyone got any insight there?
I can start. I think you need to be available for, to branch outside of your space that you are involved in. I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. When I first started out in regulatory many years ago, right? I had a manager who was not very comfortable with sort of anyone reaching outside of the workspace that we were in. And I just was not taking that. I would reach out to corporate all the time, and I'd be like, hey, I saw there was a new draft guidance that came out. I'm really interested in it. Can I help, do a gap analysis between the old guidance and the new guidance, and help the company out that way? And they kept taking that. They kept taking that. And what that gave me is that helped me build bridges with leaders in corporate, leaders in different cross-functional groups, that ultimately got me to really where I am today, because I just kept building relationships and maintaining those relationships because of, again, my personality and my interest and my ambition to learn more and to really broaden my scope and not just be contained in, doing the submission work. Yes, of course, that's important, but taking a little bit of an effort outside of your comfort zone, outside of what you are given, you're paving your own way. You don't need to wait for them to come to you. You need to be reaching out and really looking for opportunities to, again, spread your wings within your organization and outside as well.
That's there is a really good podcast episode specifically on networking and building relationships within an organization. So if anyone is interested in learning more about that, have a look at Career Diaries by Elemed, and there is a podcast episode specifically on that topic, which I learned a lot from, so I'm hoping everybody else will as well. Let's keep going because we've got more questions and we're running out of time. I can't believe how quickly it's going. So the next one that I would like to put to you is, so we've had the one about difficult conversations. So we've had that one. Okay. So let's see what we can get from this. I would love to hear from guest speakers personal anecdotes of bad communication. So we've spoken a lot about good communication, but do you have any stories of bad communication and things that haven't worked?
Yeah, maybe I can start. So I once joined a meeting between a group of US individuals, but also a group of individuals from Central Europe. And the US team presented a proposal and basically asked for support and asked for feasibility, put out a spreadsheet, 10 topics. And the Central European guys immediately jumped, best intentions, but immediately jumped on the 2 red dots and said, oh, with these 2 topics, we will run into problems. And that was not well perceived by the US guys. And I think that is, a nice example about cultural differences, no bad intentions. And maybe to add on, I also would like to introduce the aspect of self-awareness. I think awareness of the audience, awareness of the environment, messaging, and so on and so forth. And I think it's also important, and I think also a success factor for good communication if you have a certain and constantly learn about yourself. Example, I'm leaning towards a task-based person, and that might work in most of the instances quite well. But when I generalizing a little bit, when I speak to someone in Latin America, then the individual might say, hey, Jens, stop, no spreadsheet. Who are you? Who am I speaking to? Do you have a family? What are you doing in your spare time? So be aware about yourself might help with communication as well, and identify blind spots.
There's actually a question which I'm going to jump to now, which is around that cultural difference in communication. So how to be aware of cultural differences in communication. For example, direct is great in some countries, but in other countries it's an offense, and same for styles. So does anyone have any, so again, the question is going to pop up in the chat in just a second, but I'm going to read it one more time. How can you be aware of cultural differences in communication? Direct is great in some countries and it's an offense in others.
I can maybe, and I'll put it in the chat. So I use my cultural Bible. As a matter of fact, I kid you not, I have it right here. You can't see it, but it's called, I use a book which is called The Culture Map. It's written by Aaron Meyer. I see a few people nodding. I read it all the time. It's still very relevant after all this time, but it kind of gives you the lay of the land. Where am I going to? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? It gives you a great opportunity to prepare. I don't know Aaron Meyer, right? So I'm not making any money out of this, but I found this book early in my career. It's been super helpful to me, right? And I use it a lot. Whenever I fly somewhere, I always bring it with me. That's why I call it my Bible. But it's fantastic. It's a long answer to a short question, Elena. But it's all about knowledge and then bringing it into practice, being aware of where you go to. We mentioned that a few times, right? Am I going to Asia, to Jens's point? Am I going to South America? Am I going to the US or Germany, right? Some people will argue, Morgan, that's a different world as well. Yeah. But no, it's that consciousness, but there's great material out there.
Thank you for the tool. Jens, yes.
Maybe to add 2 more, Lewis communication model might be an interesting one. And a guy from actually the Netherlands, Jeroen Hofstede, he also dived into the various cultures.
So yeah, if you send these resources to us afterwards, we'll make sure that we link them on the follow-up email so that all of the attendees can get access to those resources. So thank you for sharing those. Okay, so another question I want to put out here. So any good practices and tips on handling emotionally charged conversations with my direct reports and keeping the conversation empathetic and professional? So any good practices and tips on handling emotionally charged conversations with my direct reports and keeping the conversation empathetic and professional?
I think this goes back to active listening, asking questions. Depends on how far you are in this emotional state. Maybe sometimes it's better to make a break. Say, well, let's meet again tomorrow or in 30 minutes. Get a coffee, breathe. But if it's still handleable and it's still in a way you still can ask questions, and I would suggest try to use active listening, rephrase what the person said, ask questions, and get to the bottom of the issue. And in most cases, I think it's solvable, and you will be surprised how easy it is to solve. And the topic where somebody is blowing up, it's maybe not the topic, let's say, the fundamental topic they are bothered about.
There's something bigger potentially underlying, or it's the emotional outburst might be a result of a build up over time of something else.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for that one more one. Okay, so just because I'm conscious that we're starting to come to the end of this, I want to offer to you all, are there any other useful techniques that we haven't covered that people can focus on for improving their communication skills? Any other techniques?
I would say be the first one to ask a question. How often do you find yourself in a big meeting, somebody's presenting something, you have a question, probably the other 10 folks around you have the same question, right? That's okay. There's no silly questions, right? And very often when you ask that question, a lot of people are happy that you're the one asking that question, right? So the question pops up, just ask it. We talk about this, I'm in regulatory affairs or some other technical job, whatever it is, right? There's a good chance that you're not the only one with that question. So don't be afraid to speak up. As a matter of fact, it's probably valued when you do. Somebody else is actually happy that you asked the question. Yeah.
That's a good point. Amra?
Yeah, I can add to that a little bit too. For me, what's been really helpful, early in my career is practicing giving presentations, right? Practicing public speaking, practicing listening, really being conscious of those nonverbal cues, right? But consider maybe, in today's day and age, we all have phones, record yourself, right? Analyze your tone. Think about, if you're pacing, right? If you're adding too many ums and hums, right? Consider recording yourself and listening to yourself and sort of viewing how you are communicating. Have a conversation with yourself on the phone. If it's something that's really going to be make or break for your career moving forward, it comes down to practice, right? It comes down to really being prepared. Oftentimes, I know it's easier to do a presentation. It's easier to engage in a conversation when you know the topic, when you're familiar with topic. But sometimes you can be, surprised with the direction of the conversation. So kind of practice where that can go and watch and make changes based on what you see on videos. And, sometimes it's easier also to get family involved, right? If it makes sense to have your kids watch you or, significant others sort of watch you and give you feedback. All of those may be a little bit easier to swallow first than, having that approach with someone professionally.
Yeah. Thank you. And Jens?
Yeah, if you, for example, observe someone who is doing something particularly well, don't be shy to approach that individual, ask about his or her technique, and at the end, you might end up with a mentor.
Yeah. And also maybe if you're not brave enough to speak openly in front of a family, friends, or somebody, then just watch different conversations, watch videos on YouTube and think about, how would I react? How would I answer this? How would I engage in this? Would I do it better? Would I do it different? Or can I learn something from it?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we're coming to the end of the session, and it's been really interesting hearing all of your perspectives on communication, because there's no one size fits all ultimately, but I've taken away a lot from this episode and learned a lot from your different styles and techniques that I'm going to be taking into my own leadership style. Thank you all for joining. We're going to jump now into, I would like to know from our attendees what they've learned. So if you're in your Slido, keep it open, because we should be having a question appearing that is not where are you joining from, but it's what was your biggest learning from the session. So take a second, because this is where we get feedback. This is our opportunity to see what are you taking away from the last hour and a bit that you've spent with us today. So what did you learn from the session? Let's see what people have to say. So what did you learn from the session? We have ask questions. We've got be authentic. That's really important. So somebody's written here the impotence of storytelling, but I'm sure that means the importance of storytelling. So yes, storytelling is super important. The culture map by Erin Mayer, yes, and we will make sure we link to that in the follow-up notes as well. Keep it simple is a real strong message when it comes to mastering communication, especially communication across cultural boundaries and different what I call verticals, but we mean different functional areas. First, phone call. Second, email. Really nice, really nice. Be open and honest. And it's okay to be open about weaknesses. So there's been so many, and the learnings keep coming. So that's really good. We've obviously managed to get the message home to our attendees. So thank you to everybody. The next question that's going to be launching on your Slido is, will you be attending the next session? So it's our intention to keep doing these future leader sessions as long as you guys get value from them. So please take a moment to let us know. And all I can see so far is yes on the screen. So that's 100% conversion, really good feedback. So I am pleased to let you know that we are working on our next session, and we'll be announcing that shortly. But today I wanted to announce actually something new that we're working on here at Elemed. So we are looking at putting together a series of skills assessments. So over the last 10 episodes of Future Leaders, we've been talking about the importance of these different leadership skills: communication, negotiation, leadership. And so we're currently working here at Elemed on building a suite of assessments that you can figure out actually your own personalized score and ranking. And I'd like to know if you think this is a good idea. So if it is, please join the waitlist. If you scan this QR code or click the link that's appearing in the Zoom chat now, it should take you to a very simple form to fill out. It will give you access to the waitlist. And as soon as these assessments are built, they will be free. You will get access to them first. And this will help you as well identify where your potential gaps are and how you can be working on your communication skills and generally your leadership skills as you move forwards through your career. So please scan this QR code, join the wait list. I'm really interested to see the feedback that we're going to get from this. It's something we've been working on for quite some time. And the other thing I wanted to share with you all was the QR code to all the other recordings of Future Leader sessions. So this is episode 10. That means there are 9 other 90-minute sessions packed with value available for you to access on our website. So click it there. You can either watch it on our website, you can listen to it as a podcast on Career Diaries by Elemed. And stay tuned for more information on the next episode of Future Leader series, which will be coming soon. I want to say we're at the top of the hour. So thank you all, everybody, for joining and staying with us for the full 90 minutes. And thank you to our amazing panelists. You've been absolutely phenomenal on this episode. I wish you all an amazing rest of your day and see you soon somewhere in the world. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.